The Dragonback series by Timothy Zahn. Book 3, Dragon and Slave. Chapter 34. Jack threw his arm up to protect his eyes from the light, but even before the arm was in position, his wrist was grabbed and twisted roughly behind his back.
I told you he couldn't resist the temptation.
Neverland's smooth, snake-like voice came over the scuffling noises of heavy feet suddenly on the move. More hands grabbed at Jack's arms and shoulders, pinning them in place. Bodies, smelling like sweaty brumga, pressed up against him from all sides, preventing him from using his feet to either run or kick.
And I told you,
Gazen's less civilized voice retorted,
that he was working with the Tubman group.
Cautiously, Jack eased his eyes open against the glare. Gazen and Neverland were standing just inside the door at the far end of the cabin, with Neverland's two bodyguards on either side of the boss. The one Dracos had clobbered earlier had a pressure bandage on his head, a scowl on his face, and a nasty-looking gun in his hand.
Don't be absurd,
Neverland scoffed.
The Tubman group? Nonsense. Virgil Morgan and his nephew don't do charity work. Then how do you explain all those slaves skulking around out there?
Gazen demanded.
I tell you, he's trying to stir up a revolt.
Slowly, carefully, Jack turned his head. He got only about halfway around before one of the Brumgas noticed the movement and twisted his head to face forward again. But he'd seen enough to figure there were 8 Brumgas crowding around him. Closer to Dracos's estimate than his. Still very lousy odds.
He just brought them to spread a little chaos in case he needed a diversion,
Neverland said.
As far as he's concerned, they're expendables.
He cocked an eyebrow at Jack.
Nor hadn't you noticed that he didn't actually bring any of them aboard with him? So you don't think they're of any use as bargaining chips?
Gazen asked.
Not a chance,
Neverland said.
Take them back to their huts or burn them where they stand. Your choice.
Gazen nodded and reached to his collar.
Wait,
Jack said. The instant the word was out of his mouth, he wished he could call it back. Gazen surely wouldn't simply kill Marilyn and the others, at least not here and now. Even if he decided their actions deserved that, he would more likely have them whipped to death as an object lesson to the rest of the slaves. But Jack hadn't thought it through quickly enough, and now it was too late.
Well, well,
Neverland said, smiling smugly.
So he really does have some feelings for those dirty little zeros out there, does he? This is one for the record books. Or else he's just squeamish,
Gazen rumbled contemptuously.
You should have seen his face after those Wistwaki passed him in the kitchen this morning. You didn't need to whip them, Jack ground out. They didn't steal the food. I did. Gazen snorted. Don't make me laugh. You were in the frying pan all night. Forget the food, Neverland said impatiently. Tell me, Jack, how much do you really care about that riffraff out there? And decide quickly, Gazen added. I've got a squad at the upper windows with sniper rifles trained on them.
Jack swallowed. The trap had been sprung, and here they were, with all the Brumgas clustered close around him. But Dracos was still lying quietly against his skin. What in space was he waiting for? And then, as he focused again on the group by the door, he suddenly realized what the reason was. Oh, yeah, that's real brave, he said, putting as much scorn into his voice as he could. Shooting unarmed slaves from windows. That's the way a man does business. As opposed to whatever you did to my guards out there, Gazen countered. You should be happy I didn't kill them, Jack said, hoping he was right in guessing that Dracos hadn't killed them. Or Mr. Neverland's hoppy pop bodyguard there, he added. How's your head, pal? The bandaged guard made a sound deep in his throat. Easy, John Doe, Neverland said. You'll get your turn. Yeah, it's always their turn, isn't it? Jack said contemptuously. Bodyguards and Brumgas. You two ever do any of this stuff yourselves? Or do you always hide behind other people? Gazen took a step forward. Listen, kid.
Stop it,
Neverland said. His voice was quiet, but there was something in his tone that brought Gazin to a sharp halt.
Don't let him goad you. He's finished and he knows it.
He doesn't think I'm finished, Jack said loftily. He's still afraid of me. If he wasn't, he wouldn't always be hiding behind his brumgas. He's a coward, pure, simple, and unfrosted. He cocked an eye toward the brumgas in his line of sight. You know, if I were you, I'd find a better boss to work for.
Shut up,
Gazin snarled. Make me, Jack challenged. Gazin's glare shifted over Jack's shoulder. He sensed a slight movement behind him.
I said stop,
Neverland snapped.
Are you insane, Gazin? We need him conscious to talk to his uncle.
All right, Jack said sarcastically. I'm supposed to talk him into surrendering. Suppose I don't feel like doing that right now.
Then your friends outside will die,
Neverland said softly. Jack gave him a smile he wasn't particularly feeling. And you think I care? For a long minute, Neverland studied his face. Jack met the gaze evenly, his heart pounding in his chest. If they called his bluff, if Gazin started shooting the slaves out there.
With all due respect, sir,
the unbandaged bodyguard murmured,
I don't think we have time for this. Those Gin 90s could be here any time. He has a point, Jack,
Neverland agreed.
We don't want your uncle getting himself killed in a firefight, now do we?
I'm not going to tell him to surrender, Jack said stubbornly. We've got time on our side, and you don't dare hurt me. Neverland shook his head.
For a clever boy, Jack, you have some amazing memory failures. Caston!
The unbandaged bodyguard slid his gun back into its holster and pulled out a small, flat box. Opening it, he pulled out a hypo spray.
The squatter poison,
Neverland identified it.
Remember?
Jack pressed back against his captors as if trying to cringe away from the hypo spray. One of the brumgas tightened his grip on his arm.
Ow!
Jack gasped, as if it had really hurt.
Don't hurt him!
Neverland snapped.
I didn't,
the brumgan protested, sounding bewildered.
I just...
Jack hissed again in imaginary pain.
Stop it!
Gazin flinched as Neverland screamed at the order across the room.
You heard, Mr. Neverland,
Gazin ordered.
Back off him,
Neverland said.
Just back off!
Reluctantly, but obedient, the brumgas let go of Jack's arms and shuffled a step backward.
Last chance, Jack,
Neverland said.
One way or another, you're going to cooperate.
Jack took a deep breath, straightening as tall as he could. I don't cooperate with losers, he said. Neverland shook his head.
You young fool,
he said softly.
Do it, Caston.
The bodyguard started forward again, shifting the hypo spray into working position in his hand. Jack hunched down, raising his fists into a boxer's stance. You keep away from me, he said tightly. You hear?
This is ridiculous,
Neverland said, the smooth coating of his voice cracking with exasperation.
John Doe, go and hold him.
Yes, sir, the bandaged bodyguard said, taking a couple of quick steps to catch up with his partner. His gun pointed squarely at Jack's stomach. Side by side, the two men approached, the brumgas backing off another step as they approached.
Very good, Jack,
Dracos murmured. You're welcome, Jack murmured back, smiling in satisfaction. Because now, instead of there being two armed men out of easy reach at the far end of the room, the whole group of enemies were nicely clustered together. There you go, buddy, he added as John Doe and Caston stepped up to him. Have a good time. And with a Kada battle scream, Dracos burst from the front of his shirt. He took out the two bodyguards first, one forepaw slapping hard against their heads in a quick 1-2 punch. Twisting in midair, he caught Caston in the chest with his rear paws and shoved off him to reverse direction. Almost as an afterthought, his flicking tail sent John Doe's gun sailing across the room to bounce off the side wall. Jack dropped into a low crouch. He'd had a vague plan of slipping out of the center of the fight and trying to get one of the bodyguard's guns so he could give Dracos some help. But there was no need for a plan. Dracos was way beyond any need of help. Once before, Jack had seen his new partner in combat fighting a group of scavenger hyenas in the Vargran colony spaceport. He thought then that he was seeing the dragon at its full potential. He'd been wrong. He'd been terrifyingly wrong. It was as if someone had dropped a black-scaled threshing machine on top of the Brumgas. Dracos was everywhere, leaping and diving and twisting across their heads and shoulders like an insane cat on hot metal. He'd never seemed to touch the same Brumga more than once, but each time he did, his claws slashed or his paws slammed or his tail whipped. And when the Brumga fell, he didn't get up again. They never had a chance. This kind of fighting wasn't in any of their training manuals, and there was no time to improvise. Drawn slapsticks were knocked aside, hastily drawn guns were ducked beneath, and the attack went on. They didn't know how to stop him or how to get out of his way. They never even knew which direction he would be coming from next as he shoved randomly off their fellow soldiers or the ceiling into each new attack. It was over almost before Jack could catch his breath. Certainly it was over before he could move. The last Brumga slammed backward to the deck, and with a final spin and leap, Dracos again shot past overhead. Jack spun around, suddenly remembering Gazin and Neverland. He needn't have worried. Both men were still by the door, frozen in place like a pair of well-formed ice sculptures. Dracos was standing on the deck in front of Gazin, stretching up to his hind paws with his head so close to the slave master's that his snout nearly touched the other's nose. One set of claws pressed against the side of Gazin's neck. Jack cleared his throat. In the sudden deadly silence, the noise sounded like distant thunder. "If I were you, gentlemen," he advised, "I'd be real careful right now."
"Mother of..."
Neverland whispered, the words trailing off as he stared at Dracos. His eyes flicked to Jack, back to the Kada.
"But it's
a poet warrior of the Kada," Jack confirmed, stepping over to Caston's limp body. He pulled out the bodyguard's gun. "You and the Valaga missed one." Neverland twitched violently at the word Valaga. He threw another look at Jack, then focused again on Dracos. And suddenly the stunned and disbelieving panic vanished.
"So it was you,"
he said, his voice almost calm again.
"You were the boy who escaped us on Iota Clestes."
"Right again," Jack said, stepping up and pressing his borrowed gun into Neverland's stomach. "Either of you carrying any weapons, or shall I ask Dracos to search you?"
"What is this?"
Gazin hissed. Unlike Neverland, he was trembling visibly. But then, Neverland didn't have Kada claws pressing against his throat. "This is your life in your hands," Jack told him, taking the slave master's extendable slapstick from its holster. "How badly do you want to live today?" Gazin swallowed hard.
"What do you want?"
"Let's start by telling your snipers to back off," Jack said. "I want those slaves out there free to join me without getting shot." Slowly, Gazin reached toward the comm clip on his shoulder. He stopped short as Dracos gave a soft warning growl. "It's all right, Dracos," Jack soothed. "Gazin wouldn't try to pull a fast one by using code words or anything like that. He'll give the right order, and all the Brumgas will go away, and everyone will live through this. Isn't that right, Gazin?" The slave master's eyes flicked past Dracos to the Brumgas lying in crumpled heaps on the deck.
"Yes,"
he whispered. "There. You see?" Jack said. "Okay, Gazin, go ahead. Oh, and you will make it sound like everything's all right here, won't you? Like this is just a simple, minor change in the plan?" Gazin took a deep breath.
"Of course."
The performance was not exactly up to stellar award standards, but it was probably good enough, especially since most of those on the far end would be Brumgas. "Good," Jack said, after he'd shut off Gazin's comm clip and slipped it into his own pocket. "Now, I guess the question is, what exactly to do with you?" Beside him, Dracos' ears twitched.
"Listen,"
he said. Jack strained his ears. "What is it?"
"The sound of weapons fire,"
Dracos said grimly.
"The fighters have arrived."